as we've talked about this, I think one of the things that's come through is sometimes we don't fully understand the implications even of what we're doing now in some of the advances, like you talked about touchscreens and whatnot. And I've also had a discussion with you, Xandra, even about electric cars and solar energy, and how this sometimes is promoted as like the next thing that's going to solve all the problems. But you've also brought up some issues with that that I don't often hear in the discussion. I think this would be the right type of environment to even bring up some of those things. And then you feel free to pitch in as well, because you probably have thoughts on that,
thoughts.
like you have thoughts on most things. So,
valid or not? But.
Right, back to the sad, sorry, destructive thoughts here about what we think is actually being constructive, but could be destructive. So there are lots of good things out there, lots of things that are helping us with clean energy, but we often don't think about the waste. Where's the waste going, and how bad is the waste? And there are so many sources of energy, such as windmills, right? We were talking about this earlier. Where I come from in Colorado, there are whole fields full of windmills. And the sad thing is that they're killing so many birds. They killed tons and tons of birds. So, that's one concern. That's one thing to think about, is how is this source of energy going to benefit us, but also how is it going to impact the natural world? What was the specific?
You were talking about solar panels, batteries with electric cars.
Oh, right. Yes. If we're developing a lot of batteries that are really helpful, that are pretty energy efficient, but then when those things are done being used, we bury them in the ground, and what's the next thing that happens? We have to ask, where is the battery acid going? How does that affect the water table and things like that?
Which we're just yet to see.
Indeed, yes.
I mean, they could probably do some studies on it, but I mean, 100 years down the road, where are we? Like, we just don't know.
Yeah. I think it's to that point, though, of, again, it's not to say that we shouldn't do it. It's to say we need to recognize the consequences of using that technology. So every action that we do, it's like you were saying, being thoughtful. I mean, I've often jokingly said, so I live in West Virginia, we get upper 90% of our electricity from coal. It's super cheap. So I would love to have an electric car with a powered by coal bumper sticker. I mean, that's the reality where I live. If I had an electric car, it would be powered by coal. And so I would do that just because it kind of pokes at that balance of that cause and effect nature of so where's the energy for this thing coming from? And be thoughtful about it. Yeah, so you have the same thing of, you say, well, let's use a ceramic coffee cup instead of a paper cup. Well, the amount of energy that it takes to fire that cup is like 11,000 paper cups, So there's a sense in which that doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do, but I think it does kind of pop the bubble of our self-righteousness on some of the actions that we do. And so I have kind of a low level of empathy for people that get kind of moral high-horsey about the choices that they're making without thinking through kind of it goes back to, do we understand really the way that the world actually works? And so we need to have that fundamental understanding in order to decide what to do next and what not to do next.
If I could just jump on that again. Yeah. So just to add one thing that came to mind as Nathan was speaking. So I realized that maybe some of this discussion could be a bit discouraging, because perhaps you're thinking, well, we're doing our best and it's still not good enough. And what does that mean? Like just this feeling of being desperate and, what's going to happen when I stand before God and make an account for how I've treated the earth if I've done things that were wrong that I didn't even know were wrong. And earlier today, I was reading in Hosea chapter 4, verse 6, when it says, my people perish for lack of knowledge. And then it says, but my priests who have rejected knowledge, I will reject them. So there's clearly a distinction and a delineation between having a lack of knowledge and acting out of that, and having knowledge and acting against that deliberately. And God's judgment is different on those two things. So just to say that as an encouragement to you, I used to have a lot of anxiety around this and think, I'm trying to be as perfect as possible. I'm trying to not hurt the environment, but no matter what I do, it just seems like I'm contributing to the problem. So be encouraged that our God is a God who sees the heart as well as the actions.
And I think to balance that with, Jesus ate fish and killed trees to make points. So there's a difference between the use of the earth and the abuse of the earth. And so we were put in a stewarding and functioning way. And so nothing that we're saying is suggesting we shouldn't use it, but we're saying, I think this is why, if I may, it's so important for us to pray when we eat, is to recognize with gratitude everything that went into our daily bread. It's just a complex system of different countries and individuals and people, and it's glorious to think about that type of provision. And so, again, the creation is broken in order for us to live. Stuff dies, whether it's a cow or a kale plant, for you to live. I mean, death is part of it. We live because of that. And so to say that we can live harmlessly is disconnected from reality, but to do that thoughtfully and with gratitude, I think, changes something about the moral behavior of it, of just even being cognizant of what it is that's necessary for you to live. And that actually turns back into gratitude for a God who created a system that works in such a way.